everybody. Welcome back to Future Fiber. This is a channel where I talk about all the crafty things that I do. It is mostly knitting. And I've done a couple knit-in chats here, but I felt like my topics were getting a little stale and I just ran out of things to talk about pretty much. So I asked the great community of my followers on Instagram what they would like to see me kind of talk about. And I got a lot of interesting responses, but a common theme amongst them that rose to the top was drama. I don't know what gave you the idea that I was a drama mongering little girl, because you would be correct. I am. I love drama, especially if I'm not in it. But I kind of refrain from talking about that stuff typically on the channel because, one, I feel like I never really have the entire context. Like, I'm not actively in any of communities that really talk about drama like that, and I feel like there are people that are better at presenting the information and talking about it in a more interesting way than I do on YouTube already, and I'm not really actively keeping tabs on anything. But today's topic is something that happened a year plus ago, and it's kind of already like seen its resolution, and I felt like I could add something a little bit more to the story. And I think this story kind of has like a high roastability factor because like the wrong parties are pretty clear, and then like I just think it's kind of interesting to talk about from a different angle. So anyways, let's just cut to the chase and talk about what we're going to be talking about today, and it's the Knitting.com fiasco. So we're going to attempt this in a knit and chat style, so let's just talk about what I'm going to be knitting on. And it's a long-running work in progress of mine. This is the Beyond Basic sweatshirt by Wool & Beyond, and I'm knitting it up with 2 strands of Jameson and Smith 2-ply jumper weight wool, held together in different colors. So I have 2 grays that I'm holding together. Let me just recap quickly for those of you who are maybe hearing it for the first time, and just so that I could set up my argument. Basically, a lot of my information about like the basic order of events and what transpired kind of came from the Input magazine. They have a great article with a couple of different viewpoints about what actually happened, so I would also check that out if you want a more in-depth story of what actually went down. Back in the February of 2022, these 2 people, their names are Dave Bryan and Mike Jackness, but that's not really important to the story, so we're gonna call them the Knittingcom bros. I think I've seen a lot of articles as well as people talking about them and referring to these guys as tech bros. It is, I think, most accurate to kind of call them a e-commerce / like direct to consumer business. I say this because their business isn't really focused on technology per se. It's more focused on the strategy of selling online and on products, which is why I said that, but this is kind of a nitpick. They put out a podcast episode as well as a blog article on their website about them breaking into a new business venture. And their business venture was in the realm of revolutionizing the yarn and craft and knitting industry, most specifically knitting, because they bought the URL knitting.com. They were basically banking on knitting being a searchable enough term. Like, some people might go to knitting.com to learn more about knitting. And I'll go a little bit more in depth later in the video, but they basically wanted to sell products that they imported from China on a Amazon storefront that they will fork over from their Knitting.com website. I think it went viral in the knitting community for a couple of things. The first thing is that the ridiculous premise of it. I think there's also the price tag that was attached to it that made people go like, what the hell is happening? Because they bought Knitting.com for a whopping price of $80,000. And that's not even what was initially discussed as the price. The seller of Knitting.com URL had proposed it at a price of $150,000. Now, $150,000 in most parts of the United States gets you a home. So you can kind of see how much money that is. And while this is not the most expensive that URLs sell for example, like voice.com, their sale price of voice.com was in like the millions. So that's not really like, as far as tech and all of that goes, it's a modest sum, but their strategy for business was overall kind of weak. So people got a wind of it. People, I mean the knitters, and they were rightfully very upset that these people who have never really been involved in the community and knitted even. Yeah, so it's just, you know, a classic case of somebody who's not really interested or invested in an existing community kind of coming over and then trying to say like, what if we built something, made something, whatever, to make your lives easier, make you give us money. They very quickly realized that knitters were not to be trifled with, and they had to kind of pivot their business strategy a little bit. That's like the basic thing that happened.
Now, I don't really have a great transition for this next part, but basically we're going to dig a little bit deeper into why I think this business venture was kind of doomed from the start.
To explain their business model that they have kind of shared in their podcast episode, which I managed to find. I thought it was wiped off the internet, but I did find it and I listened to it because I also wanted to give them a fair chance in like explaining their position and all of that. And I have a couple points that I that I jotted down as I was listening to it. First of all, it was really difficult to listen to, and I listened to a lot of, you know, technical jargon every day, and I do listen to a lot of business like jargon like KPIs, CAC, all of that stuff. But like this was a podcast chock full of, you know, just kind of buzzwords. And then it took me to like, I needed to like skip to the middle kind of to understand like what they were kind of trying to do with the business. And basically these guys kind of bill themselves as SEO experts on their Ecom Crew website. Something that they said in this podcast that kind of stuck out to me was that their business mode was that they were going to start 100% on kind of an Amazon storefront, and then along the same line they will also have this like Knittingcom content-based website that kind of feeds people towards their Amazon storefront. So like you might have buzzword focused SEO optimized article on their content website that says like how to start knitting or what best yarns to get, whatever, and then they will just embed in the links to their Amazon web store is what I'm thinking. And then while they're simultaneously doing that, they were also like, once we get that kind of off the ground, we're going to go towards having more of our sales be on our own Shopify web store. I was listening to this and I was like, okay, well, like what exactly are they selling then? Because I get the business model. I think it's pretty standard. You see it a lot in those kind of advertising. Their approach to business building and entrepreneuring, I feel like, is something that we see very often nowadays. Maybe you got served a piece of content on TikTok or YouTube, or maybe you've seen it in the form of an ad that promotes that particular content. But there's a lot of people that use their previous success in kind of like numerical values, like, oh, we did a 7-figure business last year, or they flaunt their wealth in other ways, like maybe they have like a very expensive car. I think these guys are not quite that level, but you see that a lot. I think it's important to understand like where they got this idea from, and it's because one of the founders had a previous business that was based on coloring books, and so he sold adult coloring books through this basically exact same business model, and then they saw like moderate success with it. I think that's fine and admirable, and maybe if you've seen success once with like one product, you would think about applying it to a different product. Except adult coloring books had a very specific kind of niche market, and knitting is like a broader market with different products. And that they do mention that in the podcast as well, but then they kind of gloss over it like, oh, like, yeah, like knitting, it's more for niche people than adult coloring books because they need more specialized tools and whatever, and that just gives us more opportunity to branch out into different product areas. And I don't think they were thinking about it like that deeply in a way where they were like, oh, there might be already established businesses that sell these things that are highly regarded in the existing community. I don't think they were thinking about it that deeply. And there are other things that they said in the podcast episode that were just like so misinformed, maybe like under-informed. I don't know. It just ran, the whole thing kind of sounded incredibly misguided. I think it's like the nicest way to say it. A couple things that were just really funny. They were talking about some case study that came out from Google a while ago. This is verbatim that I wrote down. Great case study from Google that came out a couple years ago about some SEO tactic, and I immediately was like, well, that's outdated. Now, like, there's some things that you can do to improve your chances of being kind of listed higher on the Google search. There are some basic level things that you can do, like tagging your content properly, and making sure to, have titles that are maybe like relevant to certain topics or easily searchable. You don't want to be overfilling an article, for example, that you write on a blog post with a bunch of buzzwords. Like, you don't want to be blasting it with like knitting everywhere. Or if you're selling like jet skis, you don't want to spam the whole article just by placing the word jet ski everywhere. And that's what he was referring to. But it's just like SEO, you're at the mercy of the great algorithm, like just like YouTube. And there aren't a ton of things that you can do to really say like this will definitely measurably improve your metrics, unless you have some secret knowledge that I don't. I think it is pretty difficult to say that whatever your actions were after a certain like benchmark of improving your search engine results, it's hard to really materially like connect what you did to the improvements, and vice versa. You could also like just have done nothing different, but then your search results might not be as good. And so that's all up to like the great Google or great, I guess Bing also has their own algorithm. So it's like difficult to really say. So you just gotta, make sure that you have a recognizable brand name and all of that stuff before you start your business. But these guys were trying to do the opposite, where by purchasing Knitting.com and then trying to create their business off of that. And it is kind of depressing because if you type in knitting in Google, Knitting.com is not the first thing you see. So their business didn't even work. I kind of got off on a tangent there, but they were talking about NFTs at some point. They were kind of comparing like the $80,000 that they spent on Knitting.com and saying they like know that this is a fair price. Just like how some people might chastise people for buying an ape NFT. I don't know what they were really referring to there, but I just thought it was funny that, of course, they would talk about NFTs. And then another thing was, this is like a total pet peeve thing of mine, but like they interchangeably use niche and niche. And I think it was like two different people like that were pronouncing it differently, like consistently. But then I couldn't tell them apart in the podcast episode. And then, okay, well, for me to talk about this next point, I need to explain to you a little bit about get-rich-quick schemes. Kind of going back to the advertisements you might see while you're just trawling through the web, whether that be on TikTok, whether that be on Instagram, whether that be on YouTube. YouTube has a lot of those as well. How to start your own Airbnb business and become a millionaire. How to drop ship certain items from China, from Alibaba, from AliExpress, and sell them for a markup on Amazon and get rich. I think another thing is just straight up drop shipping, like how to have a storefront that sells some sort of item. I don't know, non-waterproof umbrellas. How to buy those, how to have that on a Shopify website and then sell to the masses. And then you don't even have the stock in stock. You write some sort of code, you write a piece of script that every time a order comes in, you put in the order, appropriate order to the Alibaba or AliExpress vendor, and then they ship directly from China to the person who thought they were getting a American or, like Western based business to ship to them, and now they have to wait 3 weeks instead of 2 days. If you do these certain things, you can be suddenly a millionaire within 3 months. And it really appeals to people, especially in times like this, because people are having a hard time. Like, it's difficult because the cost of living is going up, like all around the world. It's difficult to own homes. It's difficult, keep yourself employed and fed and all of that stuff. So it's just naturally that people want, I want an easier way out than working a 9 to 5. You want to be a business owner. You want to be an entrepreneur. You want to be a boss babe. You want to be a boss man, a boss baby. You want to be all of those things at the same time. And I thought it was kind of interesting that this was like the ecom crew dudes, their business model was in many ways very similar to these get rich quick schemes. I'm not calling them a scammer. I'm just saying like the business model is exactly like what a lot of these courses on how to become a millionaire are teaching. I just thought that was pretty notable, and it is difficult. They're giving an honestly pretty earnest try, at doing this business venture. They've put in their own money and all of that, and they're not just simply selling courses to tell you how to become a millionaire or whatever. Even though they are selling courses, currently not for sale right now, but if you purchase Ecom Crew Premium, you could have access to all their courses on how you can too be successful and a 7-figure revenue owner, business person, boss babe, hashtag girl boss, Maseratis. They did also spend $80,000 though, so much for that, right? Anyways, I think for this kind of scheme to kind of work though, you need a good product behind it, because like at the end of the day, yeah, you could optimize for SEO, you could optimize for just getting lucky on Amazon, but then you do need to have some sort of understanding of people's wants and needs before you jump into starting your very own 7-figure business. Disclaimer, I'm not a business girly. I don't know what the hell is going on with the monies, but I think this is pretty common sense, right? Like for you to start a product-based business, you gotta want to fall into like 3 different categories for you to really hit it big. I think the first thing is like having a differentiator, like filling some sort of a market gap, like really solving some sort of need something that hasn't really been solved before, whether that be in an existing market or whether that be in like a totally new type of product. And these are the things that usually show up on like Shark Tank. So I think a great example is like Scrub Daddy. Like those sponges, you're probably getting hit everywhere left and right with these, or maybe it's just me because I watch a lot of cleaning TikToks and then cleaning like content that like promotes me to not clean my own place. But it gives me secondhand satisfaction, you know what I mean? So I see a lot of people using Scrub Daddy, and then they talk about how good of a job it does with cleaning and stuff. It's a drastic improvement. It's a differentiator from like existing sponges, whether that be in just in its cute like shape and viral marketing. Another thing is if you offer a product that is easier to access than like its competitors. So a good example of this is just like basically anything that is on like Amazon Prime, anything, but it has to be a good product, right? Like it has to be something that everybody uses every single day, but you have to be able to get it more readily on Amazon or whatever. Maybe this isn't like a totally one-to-one thing, but like I think Stanley Cup dupes on Amazon, Stanley Cups are expensive. They're like, I think they're $40, right? Like for a cup, and I'm sure they're good and whatever. I don't personally own one. But Stanley Cup dupes, I think they are more accessible because they're cheaper, one, and then 2, they're like more readily available. There's this one brand that everyone always says is like a direct like Stanley Cup dupe, and it's like you can't have it be like totally different quality than the original thing that you're trying to like make more accessible, but it's like just as good quality and cheaper and available in multiple different colors. So like that would be the second category, I would think. And then the third thing is just like if you just have a really good marketing and design. Every direct-to-consumer product-based business that is marked as a startup, I think it happens a little bit more frequently in New York than in San Francisco, but you can totally correct me if I am wrong. You've seen them. If you're in New York and you're on the subway, you've seen those ads. You've seen Parachute, you've seen Away, you've seen Allbirds. Shoes exist, luggage exists, so does bed sheets. But what makes them a differentiator from stuff you can get at DSW, something that you can get at Marshall's, something that you can get at, I don't know, Macy's.com? Branding. All the different ways that they make you want to like have this different lifestyle that you feel like it will be attainable, a little bit more attainable if you buy $200 bed sheets. That is like, I would say, the third thing that makes direct-to-consumer thing a legitimate direct-to-consumer business, product-based business, as opposed to just a get-rich-quick scheme. And I think the second point about, offering something easier to access, I think that is what makes a lot of people think like, oh yeah, this is totally doable. I can just buy that one product on Alibaba and then I'll make a killing. It's actually a lot harder than you think to find that one product. Well, clearly these guys didn't do it because it didn't work for them either. And they have a whole course on it on their website. But it's because it happens in one of two ways. You were already doing that thing, or you were already planning to do it, or you got in early in the market, so that's luck. And then the second part of it is where it comes into like, it's a lot of work, and that is doing market research. These econ crew guys, I think people have roasted them 360, many different ways and angles on the internet already about this, but they just didn't really do market research because they just didn't have a great understanding and a grasp of who they were going to be potentially targeting with Knitting.com. You can approach like market research in a couple ways. I'm not really an expert in this, but how I would do it is just like to understand like what are the typical entry points, right? Like you have to first identify who you're going to sell to. Like knitting is a broad market, so are you going to sell to the people who are already in it and really deeply in it, or are you going to sell to people who are just starting to get into it? I think they failed on both fronts, but let's just talk about like them in kind of order, I guess. So if we were to like kind of phrase those two things that I said into questions, I would do it as like, how do people get into knitting? And then what are your current competitors? I think that's like the baseline of some research that you should potentially do before you start to buy a $80,000 URL to start the business. First question, how do people get into knitting? I actually want to dig into this a little bit separately in a different video, but for the sake of this exercise of me talking about this business venture, yeah, just like you gotta go out and talk to people. Like, how do you get into knitting? I think a lot of it happens through social media nowadays, and it's not through the traditional like search channels that these guys were aiming for. What is the motivator? What is the original influencer that got people into knitting? And it's influencing. It's social media. It's someone externally in their real life that knits. Like it's somebody that's close to you in some proximity, like close even through like the form of social media, like whether it be through a parasocial relationship with an influencer who takes up knitting, or maybe you get influenced by seeing this girl post a TikTok of her making a crochet dress and you're like so inspired, so you start. Or maybe you have a friend who's knitting and they tell you that it would be something that they could do together, so you get into knitting like that. They're going to be getting a lot of information already on where to buy the supplies, where to buy, where to go for the best like instruction and things like that. I went to a knitting circle that's being held at the local library every week, and we had a bunch of people with children come in and tell them, my kid is interested in learning about what you guys are doing. So like we'll give them a list of links and like places that they can go. They'll even suggest like what books you can check out at the library to like, learn more about how to knit and all of that stuff, or we'll teach them how to do it. But it's never, they're not Googling. They're not necessarily Googling this. And then I think if we're going along that like strategy of search engine optimization, I think you would have to hit things blog article style, like how do I do a provisional cast on? How do I do I don't know, what's another difficult technique? Come on, you can do it. What is it? How to do intarsia? How to do XYZ? But it's like, there are already so many places that have put this out, because knitting's been online. Knitting's been online for 20 years at this point, for decades. So anything that you want probably already exists. And for a fact these grandmas are gonna be these grandmas that they dissed in their podcast. They're gonna be doing a much better job telling me how to do a provisional cast on. The second question, what are your current competitors? So, I mean, you need to kind of narrow it down originally, but let's just talk about since they said and they started pivoting towards, we're going to target people who are just getting into knitting. Let's talk about that first, and then we can talk about, people who are already in the hobby. Where are they going to go for any craft? Big box stores? Walmart? Walmart has yarn. Where are they, where have they gone already physically or online that they know to buy these craft supplies? In United States, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, Walmart, Joann's.
Although let's give them credit where credit's due, and they did end up going to what it seems like a Joann's, but they've only went to one. And it's really hard to change human behavior that's already there. So if they're already going to big box stores that are physical and not going online to Amazon to buy the stuff, then it's going to be really difficult for your business to appeal to them.
Even if you don't know anything about knitting, I think I would hit up one of those before I go on Amazon and search knitting, you probably don't even know what to look for if you're on Amazon. Honestly, I think if you go to a physical store, you have the store salesperson that you can ask. It's oh, I want to take up knitting. What do I need to buy? You go to Amazon.com, they're not going to tell you. You look up knitting, and what are you going to get? You're going to get maybe some books. You're going to get some yarn kit. You're going to get a knitting, those cheap bamboo with plastic noodles attached to a circular needles, fixed circulars that come in a set of bajillion in a box. And it's yeah, you might buy that stuff on Amazon instead of going to the box store, but what are the chances that your drop shipped Amazon bag of yarn is going to show up before, I don't know, the already established yarn brands? Barnett, Red Heart. Well, Red Heart is Barnett, but Lines brand. Let's do a quick Google search right now, actually. Let's do a little Amazon searchy search. Okay, we have knitting kits for beginners, adults. Some crochet kit, which is definitely not knitting. We have a knitting bag. We have a yarn. We have knitting, end caps. We have a learn to knit kit. But this is what I mean. This is already, people have put some thought into this. These are kits and whatever that people... Oh, Woobles is another one. Why would you... How do you expect to survive in the space that already has market saturation? They didn't even search knitting on Amazon, which was going to be their primary selling platform. That's kind of unfortunate. I just don't think they did a good enough job of doing the market research, and it came to bite them in the booty. Because they also didn't think about the people that were already in the hobby. I think a lot of business in very niche hobbies come from the select group of select percentage of people who are really, really into it, Let's take another hobby, for example, tabletop gaming. First of all, it has a pretty high entry to barrier. I think knitting has a lower entry to barrier, but still you need to learn. You need to use your brain a little bit to learn how to knit. So I would say the barrier to entry is not low, super low. I think it could be lower if you have somebody who's helping you through it, and especially with all the content that's out there. But that's besides the point. Tabletop gaming. People that are in it are in it. Do you think they're going to be buying any tabletop gaming, whatever, like, new thing from a dropship seller? I think they're more likely to buy something that is, you know, kind of produced within the community. Like, maybe do a Kickstarter. They get more buzz around it. They have their, you know, like, I don't know where they would be. Maybe they have their Discords, or maybe they have their Reddit communities where they're talking about, like, the latest releases and what is, like, hottest. I feel like that, and then the fear of kind of, like, FOMO will feed into you purchasing something within, like, a very, like, niche hobby rather than SEO optimized websites. I think knitting is the same, because, like, we go crazy over limited run yarn dyes. We go crazy over, like, handmade little stitch markers, or, like, yarn bowls, or merchandise. Even if you're selling merchandise, like, you'll buy it from, like, a known, like, knitting creator. I'm not gonna buy anything from Knitting.com. And we already have Knitting.com. We have Yarn.com. And they've already, like, they've done such a better job already, because they've lifted the market cap. Yeah, market cap. Let's talk about that. Market cap is, I think, just, you know, shorter way of saying, like, how many people in the world could you sell to, right? In the billions of people that exist on this earth, how many of them would want to buy knitting supplies? And I think what they forgot to take into account is that they've essentially halved their market cap by buying Knitting.com. Yarn.com, Webs, has already beaten them out of that game by getting Yarn.com. And yarn is a base material that you could use for many different crafts. Like, even if we're thinking just in the broader terms of knitting and crocheting, they've already halved the market cap. Like, what? They didn't even do the simple research to know that
we have unbeatable SEO with Knitting.com.
Like, yeah, for knitting, just knitting, not other yarn crafts. Like, what is wrong with you? As knitters, we have a tendency to want to learn more about the craft in general. I know there are people who are like, I don't want to knit above a certain level, but then you're still consuming a lot of different, maybe you're consuming a lot of different knitting content, and you're, you know, looking out for new patterns. And so your kind of knowledge about knitting, I think, is going to passively expand if you continuously, like, engage in the community. And they just, like, didn't account for that at all. You know, like, people will get influenced by other people in the hobby. There is a big air in the knitting community and other kind of niche communities to kind of support the people that are in it. No group of humans is going to be ever drama-free or problem-free. There's always going to be conflict. That is the human nature. But I think as a community, like, knitting does a really good job of supporting the people that are within it. Because we understand that this is something that's, you're spending a lot of time on it. You're bound to be pretty passionate about it. We want to spread the joy. And we want to support people who, you know, went through that kind of, in my opinion, a little bit of a brave venture in monetizing their hobby instead of just, like, leaving it as a hobby. It's not something that I, like, actively try to do. I think I go back and forth on this a lot, but I don't really want my hobby to become my main source of life in a way where I have to rely on it for, like, income or something like that. Well, do I think it'll be nice? And I, like, you know, I've thought about that in the past as well. It's like, do I want to start a knitting-based business, or do I want to take this YouTube thing a little bit further and really go, like, 100% into it? And it's like, I ultimately decided against it, because not that I'm, like, afraid of putting in the work. I just think it'll be kind of sad to see that, like, in the past I've done that with a couple other hobbies, and I've never had it work out where it ended nicely. Like, I don't do those hobbies anymore. And I want the freedom to also to move on from my hobbies, you know? Like, I don't want to be beholden to knitting for the rest of my life. If that day comes where I decide, like, I don't want to knit anymore, like, I don't want to force myself to do something that I don't like, that I originally started as a hobby, you know? So that's kind of a tangent. But, yeah, what I'm trying to say is that it's a niche hobby, and they're not really going to be supporting... There is less of a likelihood of somebody wanting to promote and endorse something that happened from a creation outside of the craft, if you know what I mean. Realistically, there aren't as many people who will buy cheaply made knitting supplies as opposed to people that will spend mad dollars at their local yarn store or indie like creator that makes like special custom crochet hooks or yarn bowls or hand spun yarn or all of that stuff, you know? And this is just like a thing that happens with niche hobbies. Like, you have a desire to kind of like upgrade your tools, upgrade your hobby. I found myself doing this with figure skating. When I first took it up, I started out with like, you know, stock boots and blades that came from like, you know, a reputable ice skate maker, but it wasn't like, you know, top of the line. And in retrospect, I should have like gotten something else. But the more you get into the hobby and the more you interact with people, especially in the beginning, if you're not very good, like you're thinking like, oh, what if I like upgraded all these tools, and like, what if I upgraded my skates and I'll just be a better skater? That's not how that works. But it is something that is pretty prevalent, I think. And I thought that way about knitting as well. Like in the beginning, like I bought most of the purchases that I made, not even because of the no-buy year, but also like anything with the hobby. When you join the hobby and you start to get really into it in the beginning, like you want to buy everything. I felt that the strongest with not just yarn, because like yarn is something that you could continuously use, commodity that you use up in the hobby. But if you're looking at like something like knitting needles, I bought my first set of interchangeables pretty quickly, and it was like, you know, it was whatever. Like, I mean, it was pricey for me at the time, but it was good. And it took me very far, and it had all the sizes I needed pretty much. But then I started buying circular knitting needle sets out of just want rather than need, because I thought like maybe that would make me knit faster, or like I just really liked how it looked, all of that. Nothing wrong with it, but it's just like, that just shows that I didn't buy more Amazon crochet hooks. You know what I mean? I didn't buy more bamboo, like rickety fixed circulars with those gummy like cords. You know what I'm talking about? I didn't buy more of those. I bought Knit Pro. I bought Chagoos. You know? And that's like $100+ whatever. That's where the money comes from, not Amazon bamboo needles. Now I'm making an assumption on the things that they are potentially drop shipping or mass buying and selling at a markup on Knitting.com, or what they plan to sell on Knitting.com. I'm making an assumption that they're all going to be cheaply made. But I think it's a fair assumption based on like their last kind of couple of business ventures that I've seen. So I don't think I'm too out of pocket there. Knitting.com is live as of now. There is a website. At first I thought, I didn't think that they would launch. I thought they would, you know, just end up selling off the URL to somebody else, but I can see why they launched something, because they need to recoup the cost back a little bit. Like, they need to make the $80,000 back, you know? And like a one-word URL like that is, it's kind of going back to the .com bubble, you know? Where a lot of people bought up different URLs hoping that a company would come along and make the purchase, and they would make some sort of, you know, profit, because URLs, like, if you ever try to get a URL for, I don't know, your own personal website or whatever, depending on the combination of links, the words could be very cheap. It could be like, you know, $10 a month, even for a .com address. So like if you're selling that for $80,000, then you're definitely turning a profit, you know? But I think everybody kind of realized that that's not really a big, you know, viable business venture nowadays, because only a select number of those URLs really hit it big like that, you know? You shouldn't bet your retirement on that, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So I think it'll be pretty difficult for them to sell Knitting.com, especially as it is. Now, my final thoughts. What do I think about this whole shebang? I don't know anything about these guys, other than what I can tell from their website being Ecom Crew, and also like the bits that I found on Knitting.com. And I do see that they have hired some knitters, you know, people who do actually knit in the community. And honestly, no shade to them. Like, get that bag. Like, I hope they're paying you well. There are so few jobs that are kind of more formalized in like the knitting community. A lot of it is, and whether that be good or bad, I think it's mostly run through, you know, individuals. So if you want something that's like a little bit more like stable, maybe this is the gig. And there are articles on there that are, you know, written by people, hopefully. And it seems like they've kind of went on a pivot where they don't have an Amazon like storefront necessarily. Like, they're not, maybe they're still trying to stage it out, wait for the storm to kind of pass over. There are some blog articles about like how to cast on, how to do purling. This is just like a good lesson that, you know, not everything needs to be monetized. Not everything needs to be a cash grab. You can't disrupt a problem if there isn't a problem to begin with. You know what I'm saying? This is not business advice. This is not financial advice. Honestly, I'm sure they don't even give a damn, because they're already allegedly 7-figure earners, millionaires. So what do they care about us yarn and stick people, eh? I hope. Actually, I don't hope that they make their $80,000 back, $80,000+ back that they spent on this venture, because I think it'll be pretty funny. Maybe it'll be a life lesson for them that they can tell over drinks to their children in their mansions later in their old years. Maybe don't start a business in an area that you don't really have expertise in.
So I realized that I just rambled a lot and didn't actually like formulate a concise thought around what I thought about this. So I'm going to add it here as a voiceover. I think this is one of those things that just comes at the expense of business. I think if you think about people and community outside of who they are as individuals and, you know, what they bring to the world, I guess, this kind of stuff happens, and it does tend to happen, especially with get-rich-quick schemes, or in this case, this seems to have been a, you know, actual business venture that they were trying to do. But if you reduce people to numbers, this is what you get. Like, you get people trying to come into areas that they feel like they have expertise in, and then try to shake it up at the expense of the people who are already in the community. And it's a lose-lose for both us, the knitters, and the guys, because they're out at $80,000. But I think it's just like showing that well, first of all, business is really hard, and second of all, for you to have a viable, sustainable method of making money, you need to talk to the people who are involved. You need to be talking to the community. I just think we just need to be a little bit more mindful of who we're coexisting with.
Anyways, okay, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you found that entertaining. I sure thought that was entertaining. And I'll leave the links that I used to kind of inform myself to make this video in the description down below. Oh my god, it's so hot. I didn't even make any progress. I don't know. I blame it on the Knitting.com guys. Alright, see you guys later. Bye. There are some other things from the podcast that I thought were super funny. Gold gem of a line. There are niche hobbies that are not run by Amazon. Like, no way, dude. Real funny. And then another thing was they kept calling their courses that they sell on their website on how to become a e-commerce like entrepreneur. They called it secret sauce, and they kept plugging the website. And then another thing, you couldn't make this shit up. They said synergy. I thought we moved away from that word. Even in the corporate lingo world. Don't say that.